Hi, welcome back to another video. If you're new here, hi, I'm Carol, and in this channel we talk mainly about books. And in today's videos we are going to be talking about all the 14 books that I read between March and April of this year. And let's talk about the books because we have 14 books. It's quite a bit of books, and in classic Carol fashion we have a mixture of genres. We have some classics, we have fantasy, we have romance, sci-fi, we have some lit fic, like we have a good blend of genres. So let's start talking about all the 14 books that I read between March and April. By the way, not all of these books are in this wrap-up, it's just that I put more books on the pile, so it looks like I read more physical books. But I read mostly from my Kindle because, as I said previously, I'm trying to focus on reading through my Kindle TBR because I keep forgetting the books that are on my Kindle. So we can already put these books back here. Now let's start talking about the 14 books that I read in March. Let's start by talking about all the books that I read in March. The first book that I finished reading in March was actually a sci-fi. It was A Close and Common Orbit by Becky Chambers. Becky Chambers is the author that wrote A Psalm for the Wild Build, I think it's the name, which is a very popular cozy sci-fi, which I'm really curious about reading, but I had A Close and Common Orbit in my TBR, so I decided to start with this book. This is actually technically the second book in the Wayfarers series. I haven't read any other book in the series, but it's a series of interconnected standalone sci-fi novels that won the Hugo Awards many years ago. And in A Close and Common Orbit we follow this it's a found family situation. We have a cyborg, not a cyborg, but like I forgot the name, exact name right now, but it is an AI that takes a body, like takes a synthetic body and starts pretending to be a human, which in this universe it's illegal to do that, and any AI that gets caught doing that, they are deactivated, and the people that are enabling, anyone that is enabling the situation, the people that create the body, the people that put the AI on this body, they are risking getting arrested if they get found out that they are doing that. And in this book we follow our dear AI who is taking place of this pretending to be a human, and the humans that are helping her and her friends that are also kind of hiding the secret for this AI. And this is a cozy sci-fi, and it was really nice to read this. It was very heartwarming, and it was an interesting way to see and look and talk about AI. It's definitely an older book. I think it's from 2016. It's an older book. It's before AI became what AI is today. But still, I had a lot of fun. I really enjoyed reading this book. I ended up giving 4 stars. I got the first book in the series because I'm curious to continue reading the series. So I got the first book, which I still haven't read, and then I hope to be able to get the other 2 books in the series because there are 4 books in the Wayfarer series and each one follows a different character. And I'm curious to continue reading the series because it won the Hugo Awards and I really enjoyed reading the book. Now moving on to the second book I finished reading in April, and that's kind of a different vibe, and it is Problematic Summer Romance by Ali Hazelwood. And before I say anything else about this book, I initially read this book in English on my Kindle because I got this book shortly after it was released and I just had never read it, even though it was one of my most anticipated releases of the year. And even though I read it on my Kindle, I got also the physical TBR. I got a Portuguese translation for the physical TBR because I already want to read this book and I want to have a physical TBR of it on my bookshelves. But basically in Problematic Summer Romance we follow Maya and Connor. Connor is the business partner and best friends from Maya's oldest brother, who also happens to be one of the people that raised her. He's kind of like an older brother, father figure blend for Maya. And if you read Not in Love by Ali Hazelwood, you have already met Maya's oldest brother, who is Eli. He's the main character in Not in Love. And this is basically kind of a companion novel to Not in Love. But basically in this book, Eli is getting married. He's having a destination wedding in Sicily, Italy, and Maya and Connor, we find out in this book that they kind of have a history. Something happened in the past and it didn't end up well, and Maya she's kind of not necessarily bitter, but she's not Connor's biggest friend right now. She doesn't really want to be stuck on an island in a small villa with this man for a week, but because it's her brother's wedding, she is kind of like mentally preparing to be stuck on a villa with Connor for a whole week. And basically we find out that Maya and Connor, they have some sort of history that we find out about, read about in this book, and it's a romance between Maya and Connor. Of course, there is like, Maya is 23 years old, she's a 23-year-old science genius, and Connor is 13 years older than her. So there is this huge age gap, and when it comes to romance, Connor is very apprehensive of this age gap because also his father used to be married to a much younger woman. He has father issues, he has daddy issues that he's dealing with in this book, and Connor is very apprehensive of this age gap. I would suggest just going to this book knowing this is an age gap romance between Maya and Connor, and she's also a brother's best friend. That's all you need to know. I know this book has quite mixed reviews. I saw many people that also really enjoy Ali Hazelwood, either love it or hate it. I'm definitely in the camp that love this book, considering I read this book in March. I'm filming this at the beginning of May. I already got a physical copy of the book, so I can already reread this book because I really want to reread this book. And I read it only 2 months ago. I really enjoyed it. At the time I ended up giving it 4.5 stars, but looking back on it, this is definitely a 5 stars. I just really love this book. I love the dynamic between the characters. I love the humor. I love the story. Hazelwood, her books tend to talk to my brain, and this one is one that really talks to my brain for some reason. I can't exactly pinpoint what it is. I know her humor really talks to me, but when it comes to this book, I can't exactly pinpoint what about this book made it one of my favorite Ali Hazelwood books ever. Actually, right now this is currently my favorite Ali Hazelwood book, which kind of has a recency bias. Maybe we'll go back to Pink the Love Hypothesis, which is a book that will forever have a special place in my heart, in my bookish story, because it was a book that got me into reading romance, and I love that book. But Problematic Summer Romance, there's something about this book that my brain really connects with. So yes, it's the second book that I finished reading in March, and now moving on to the third book I finished reading in March, and the story is a little bit different. So after I finished reading the Problematic Summer Romance, I wanted to read something that wasn't romance, something that was kind of different vibes, because I loved that book so much that I didn't want it to kind of overshadow the next book, and I ended up picking The Teller of Small Fortunes by Julie Young. This is a cozy fantasy where we follow this young woman who works as a teller of small fortunes. She travels through small towns in this fictional world that it is highly inspired by like China and Russia and kind of like that area, sort of. And we follow this young woman who travels through small towns. She suffers a lot of prejudice because she's living in a country that I think is very much inspired by Russia, but she's from a family that's very much inspired by a country inspired by China, and so she is not from the same ethnicity as most people in this country, and the countries also, they're kind of having beef. They might be going to war, or they might not be going to war. That is something that we figure out throughout the book. And while she's on her journey, traveling to the countryside, reading small fortunes, she meets this group of people, and it's basically a book that has a found family element to it. It has a very strong found family element to it. And as I said, it's a cozy fantasy, and overall, this book was a little bit too cozy fantasy for me. It was way too cozy, barely any plot. The plot was it was a breeze of a plot for most of the book. If I remember correctly, it was around 70% throughout of the book. It was on the 70% mark where the plot started to plot, which is very slow paced. And this book was way too cozy and extremely forgettable. This is a book that, like, it sounds like I don't really know much to say about books, because I don't really know much of what to say about this book. What I remember, it was way too cozy because I don't remember I read this book. The only moment I remember I read this book is when I open my Goodreads and this book is there locked in as read, and then I remember, oh yeah, I read this book. But I can barely tell you anything about it. I do have a memory of it. If I look at the cover for way too long, I will remember like the plot points, but I don't remember. If I'm just like sitting here and thinking, oh, which books I read in March, this book will definitely, I won't remember about this book, because it was way too cozy and extremely forgettable, and ended up giving it 3 stars because it wasn't a bad book exactly from what I remember. It was just way too forgettable. Now let's move on to the next book that I finished reading in March, and this one is definitely not forgettable because it's not only one of my favorite books from March, if not my favorite book that I finished reading in March, it's one of my favorite books that I finished reading this year in general, and it is A Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J. Maas. This is the second book in ACOTAR, and there's a plot twist at the beginning of the book, which I love that plot twist, and just this book. If you haven't read A Court of Mist and Fury, you won't understand. If you have read A Court of Mist and Fury, you probably understand. If you read the first book in ACOTAR, A Court of Thorns and Roses, and you thought the first book in the series was extremely mad, you haven't picked up the second book in the series because of that, please pick this book up, because I personally thought ACOTAR was very meh. I didn't like the first book. A Court of Thorns and Roses was like, didn't really love it. Also, I didn't really hate. Also, I just really didn't like Tamlin. And then A Court of Mist and Fury. I'm in love with this book. I really want to read this book, and I still haven't finished reading the series of all the books that have already been published. And I really want to read it because the book was just so wonderful. I'm definitely Team Resend, and again, just so wonderful. It was definitely a 5 stars, if you couldn't tell, because I'm going to stop talking right now, because I will keep telling you how much I love this book for like an hour, if you let me, but such an amazing book. I was really pleasantly surprised with A Court of Mist and Fury. And then the next book that I read in March was a completely different story, and I have a reading vlog that I'm not sure when I'm going to be publishing it, but I recommend watching that reading vlog, or at least the part where I'm reading the book that I'm going to show you right now, because I filmed my reaction to the ending of this book, and my reaction will tell you everything you need to know about this book. But I read Canadian Boyfriend by Jenny Holiday. This is, as you can tell, it's a It's a hockey romance. This is a book I picked up a few years ago. I think it was shortly after it was released, just because of the premise. But basically, in this book, we follow Aurora and Mike Martin. So Aurora, she used to be she used to be a professional ballet dancer. And when she was like, I think 16, she was working at this restaurant at a mall, and she meets this young man called Mike Martin. She kind of has a crush on him, and because Aurora's life literally is basically ballet, and she's still in high school, but she doesn't really feel like she has friends. She struggles to connect with her friends. She's always feeling kind of, she doesn't really feel like she's part of the group of people, and she kind of feels awkward around her colleagues because she doesn't have a regular high school teenage life. Her life is literally ballet, and she decides to create this fake boyfriend who is heavily inspired by Mike and her idea of who Mike is. And she starts writing letters to Mike, and she starts using him kind of like a get out of jail free card. So if someone asks if she's going to prom, she would say things like, oh, sorry, I can't go to prom, my boyfriend is visiting from Canada. By the way, this book takes place in Minnesota, and I think she grew up somewhere near the border of Canada with the US, but this book takes place in Minnesota, which will explain the premise of this book. But essentially, Aurora spent her teenage years, like from 16 to like her early 20s, writing letters to her fictional imaginary boyfriend, Mike Martin, and essentially the letters were kind of like a therapy for her. And now, around I think 13 years, many years later, Aurora, she gave up on being a professional ballerina. She's working as a teacher at this ballet studio, and one of her favorite students, She's coming back to class. Her favorite student left class months earlier because her mother passed away in a tragic accident, but now her favorite student is coming back to class. And who happens to be her favorite student's dad, if not Mike Martin, who is now a professional hockey player and he plays for the Minnesota team. And the moment he walks into there, I was like, wait, is that the guy I had a crush on when I was a teenager? And she ends up striking a friendship with Mike, and they become friends, and then it's a romance, so there's a friends to lovers situation going on. And honestly, the best part about this book is the premise and the cover. The book was being aggressively mid, nothing special, until the end. And then the ending is the reason why you need to watch that vlog, which I will try to edit it and post it soon, like within the month or maybe at the beginning of June. But if you want to understand how much I dislike the ending of this book, please watch that vlog, because this book was being very meh. Mike kept giving me like a minor icks, but it's kind of like a side ick, which when you think about the context of the book, the context of who Mike is, of how Mike was living, what Mike does as a job, it makes sense, but still kind of minor red flags there. But considering the context, you are kind of like side-eye, and then you have the ending. The ending. What is the ending of this book? Man came from giving minor ick to I am disgusted by you, Aurora, you deserve better, please block him and never talk to this man ever again, and maybe create a hate account for him on Instagram, start spreading fake rumors about him, like... What is this ending? What is this ending? If my parents ever finished building their bookshelf and they still need some sort of book to place only as decoration, this is definitely one of the first books I would be suggesting for them to pick up, because I'm not going to be rereading this book. I'm sad I spent my money on this book, even though it wasn't expensive when I bought it, but I'm still sad I spent my money on this book, because truly the best part about this book is the premise and the cover. And whenever that video comes out, the cover of this book will be on the cover, like on the thumbnail of the video, almost certainly. So if you want to understand how much I hated the end of the book, please watch the video when it comes out. Because moving on to the next book that I finished reading in March. This is kind of non-fiction and a classic. It's also very short, and it is Only Though People Are Brilliant at Breakfast by Oscar Wilde. This is basically, I thought it was going to be, I don't know why, but I thought it was going to be some sort of short story or essay, but it is actually just a collection of phrases and wittyisms, I think they called it, from Oscar Wilde. It's just like Oscar Wilde quotes. Some of the quotes that you see people quoting, saying, hey, this is Oscar Wilde, they are in this book. And that's pretty much it. I don't plan on reading this book, but I'm also glad that I read this book. And they're giving Only Though People Are Brilliant at Breakfast 3 stars. I definitely prefer fiction version Oscar Wilde than wittyisms Oscar Wilde, but you know, that's fine. Moving on to the next book, and the last book that I finished reading in March, and it was Ripe by Sarah Rose Ether. This is a literary fiction where we follow this young woman who is working for this very popular like fashion tech company in Silicon Valley, and she seems to have like the perfect job, the dream job at this cool hippie, not hippie, but like this cool tech company in like 2019 Silicon Valley. But basically she has a lot of, she's very depressed and anxious, and her company is very evil, and it's just, this book is essentially a commentary on late-stage capitalism, and more specifically, late-stage capitalism in Silicon Valley. And I never really know, I don't know exactly how to talk about the book. I definitely liked reading it. I thought it was quite clever and an interesting book, but if you are feeling depressed and you are not happy with your job, I don't recommend reading this book because it might send you on a spiral. But otherwise, if you are in a good mental health space, it might be a nice book to pick up if this premise sounds interesting to you. Also, our main character has a little black hole that follows her around and is her friend. The black hole is her friend. Also, she does some very questionable life decisions. She's definitely a more unlikable narrator, but it's kind of like an unlikable narrator done right. And while I don't particularly like our female main character, I don't like our main character in general, and she makes some decisions that is like, girl, side-eye, girl, don't do that, but as a reader, it's nice, it's interesting to read about it. But yes, I finished reading Ripe in March, and I ended up giving it 4 stars. Now let's move on to all the books that I finished reading in April, and honestly, I'm looking here, we have some disappointing books, but we only have one book that I absolutely hated, which kind of is also the case for March. What is with me and books that I absolutely hated and reading those books? Like having some of the best books of the year and then having a book that I absolutely hated. But let's start by the first book that I finished reading in March, not in March, but the first book that I finished reading in April, and this one I really enjoyed, and it's also very heavy. It's A Court of Rings and Ruin by Sarah J. Maas. It's the 3rd book, the ACOTAR series. Can't really tell you much about it. If you read this book, you know what it is about. If you haven't read it, this is a very popular series, and I do recommend reading it if the premise sounds interesting to you, and if you like romantasy. If you like romantasy and you haven't read this book, why you haven't read it yet? I'm definitely way too late for the party, but like, I'm having a lot of fun joining the party right now. But yes, I really enjoy reading A Court of Rings and Ruins. It's definitely a little bit heavier than A Court of Mist and Fury. It definitely has more elements of war, which personally I don't like reading about war, but this book made me not hate reading about war, which is such great for this book, because usually I really don't like reading about war unless it's war in a far, far away galaxy. But I ended up giving A Court of Rings and Ruin 5 stars. It's actually not my favorite book from ACOTAR, but no book will be able to top A Court of Mist and Fury, I fear. No romantasy will be able to top A Court of Mist and Fury, I fear. If you have any recommendations for good romantasy that might top A Court of Mist and Fury, please let me know in the comment section, because I feel like I might need that, because I am kind of in a fantasy era for some reason. But yes, I read A Court of Rings and Ruin, ended up giving it 5 stars. Let's move on to the next book that I finished reading in April, which I also really enjoyed. I read The Wildcard by Stephanie Archer. This is the 5th and final book in the Vancouver Storm series, which said it is over, but also I understand why it needed to be over. But the Vancouver Storm series just holds a very warm place on my reader journey, just because I really like those books and they do something to my brain. But basically, in the Wildcard, you're following Jordan and Tate. Jordan, she is the bartender. She owns the bar where the characters from the previous books love to go to. She's also the best friend from the female character in Gloves Off. And Tate's the coach for the hockey team. And as we find out in Gloves Off, Jordan is the estranged daughter from the owner of the team. She doesn't really have a great relationship with her dad, and Tate has a really great relationship with her dad. And in the beginning of the book, her father, who owns the team, he announces that he will be selling the team unless Jordan joins him to working on the team. If she joins him to work on the team, he will give her the team. But if she doesn't join him, he will sell the team, which she already immediately knows that if he sells the team, like basically her friends will leave the team, they will leave the city. And so she decides to go work with her dad, and her whole job, like, she ends up shadowing Tate for a while. She also has a problem with her apartment, so she ends up living in Tate's guest house throughout the book. By the way, I googled rental laws when it comes to rental property in Vancouver, which is crazy considering I don't live in Vancouver. But what they did to Jordan is apparently illegal, so if something like that happens to you, probably go look into it, because what happened to Jordan's book is illegal, but we kind of side-eye, because for the plot that was kind of necessary, even though it was apparently not realistic at all or illegal to happen in real life. But basically, this is the premise of The Wildcard. Also, Tate is a single dad, and Jordan gets along with his daughter. And it was really nice reading this book. It was kind of sad saying goodbye to these characters, and yes, but it was really nice reading. It's not my favorite book from the series. It's kind of, I don't know, it's just not my favorite, but it was nice seeing the characters goes. One thing though is that Stephanie Archer was pretty much setting up a spin-off series from the Vancouver Storm series, where we are following the new generation of players for the Vancouver Storms, and I'm curious about that series. I hope it doesn't come out way too soon, because I feel like we need, as a reader, as a big fan of the series, we need to a little bit of time to breathe and say goodbye to these characters before the new series following the new characters comes out. But I'm still curious about the new series because some of these characters sounds interesting, and I want to know which one of the new generation of players is really good at painting. And yes, and we're giving the wild card by Stephanie Archer 4.5 stars. The next book I finished reading in April, also very disappointing. This book was very disappointing, but I read The Ashes and the Star-Cursing by Carissa Broadbent. This is the second book in the Serpent and the Wings of Night duology. It's kind of book 2, kind of like book 3 of the Crowns of Nyaxa series. And this book basically starts a few months after the ending of the Serpent and the Wings of Night, which is our fantasy book that follows vampires and terrorist trials. And I really loved the Serpent and the Wings of Night, which is why The Ashes and the Star-Cursing was so disappointing. It was just disappointing. It wasn't necessarily bad, but it's just that the first book was just so good that when you read this book, I read this book was like, And Six Scorched Roses, which is a novella that comes between the first and the second book in this duology, like also amazing, completely, absolutely loved it. And then you read this book and it's kind of like, don't really care, just want to get to the ending. It's like not bad, it's just very mad, and that was disappointing. So I ended up giving The Ashes and the Star-Cursing 4 stars. And by the way, I know there's another duology. There's another duology in the Crowns of Nyaxa series that follows different characters, and then there is another duology that was already announced. I'm not sure if the third duology is already out, but I know the second duology is out. I'm not sure if I'm going to be reading and continuing on with the series. If you think I should continue on with the series, please let me know in the comment section. Please try to convince me to continue reading the series. But I'm very leaning on not reading because I didn't love the second book, The Ashes and the Star-Cursing. I feel the story could be wrapped up here and be left there. Also, high-key, the name of the male main character in the second duology, not my favorite. If you speak Portuguese, you understand what I'm talking about. If you don't speak Portuguese, essentially the name of the male main character in the second duology, the one that follows Mish, his name isn't the exact spelling, but it sounds a lot like a very strong word that means not very great luck in Portuguese. And because I didn't love the second book in this duology, I'm not sure if I want to spend 600 pages reading a book with a male main character with a name I really don't like, and I don't want to read 600 pages of a book with a main character with that name. So if you think it's worth continuing on with the series, please let me know in the comment section, or if you think it might be a better idea to just end up the series, also please let me know in the comment section. Let's have a chat about it, because I need to talk with someone about it. We need to have a chat because I'm very excited about what to do with the series. Now the next book that I finished reading in April, it's also a very popular book, and I finished reading Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez. This is a romance where we follow Brianna and Jacob. They both work at NER, and they don't start getting along really well, and then they end up striking this fake dating situation between them. And I really like the book in the sense that I really like the characters, I really like the story, but with this book I figured out that I don't like Abby Jimenez's writing style, because this book had everything to be a 5-star for me. I like the characters, I like the story, I like the setup, I like the dynamic between the characters. Everything about the book was just perfect for me. My brain had everything to really enjoy it. But Abby Jimenez's writing style just doesn't work for me, and I don't think any of her books will ever be a 5-star. I know I have at least one other book that from hers that I really want to read one day, but I'm already aware that that book also probably won't be a 5-star just because unfortunately Abby Jimenez's writing style just not one that works for me particularly, even though I really like her setups. But yes, I finished reading Yours Truly. I ended up giving it 4 stars just because great book. The writing doesn't work for me. The next book I finished reading in April was An Academic Affair by Jodie McAllister. This book I found out through Goodreads, and turns out this book is also Australian, which I wasn't expecting. But basically, in this book we follow Sadie and Jonah. They meet on their first year in college or university, how do you call it in Australia? But they meet on their first year of college. They kind of have a rival situation, an academic rival situation going on, and then they end up being in each other's lives for the next 15 years because they meet at the beginning of university, then they do like their I'm not sure like the academic ranking in Australia, but I think they do their masters, then they do their PhD, and then they start working together as they're not tenured professors, but they are kind of like not informal professors, but they're professors in university, but they're not professional. They're not tenured professors at the university, and they both teach literature. They teach different aspects of literature, but they are both lit professors at university. And then one day, many years later, Sadie finds Jonah kind of having a mental health crisis, and they start talking. They decide to make kind of like a truce in their rivalry, because also by this moment in time they are living together, they are roommates, they share this house with like 6 other people. But Sadie sees Jonah in this very not great mental health situation. They start talking. She finds out he's having a problem with his sister, and he doesn't really have a great relationship with his sister right now, but he wants to reconnect with his sister. But they live in Sydney, his sister lives in Tasmania, and then one day opens this job position for a university in Tasmania, and because of the situation in the academic world and because of what they teach, tenure professor jobs are very difficult to come across. So they both apply for this job position. Sadie ends up getting the job, but then she finds out that on her contract they offer partner hire, which means her spouse would be granted also a job. Her spouse would also get a job if he had the qualifications. So Sadie and Jonah get married. They have this marriage of convenience, so Sadie can help Jonah get a job, and they both move to Hobart, Tasmania, so she can get a job, he also gets a job, and he helps his sister. Great setup, right? And I found out about this book through Goodreads, and I was expecting like this book is like a slow burn. Some people say it's like Mariana Zapata's level slow burns, which it's not. And overall, I like the setup of the story, I like the beginning of the story, but I didn't love the book overall because this is a romance, and I feel like this book lacked tension. It needed to have more tension between these characters. They start getting along way too quickly. There isn't like, oh my god, mutual pining, extreme mutual pining throughout this story. It's just very like, yeah, I like him, yeah, I like her, and it's like, oh, okay. These characters could easily just continue to be friends, and it wouldn't really change much because, no, it lacked a lot of tension. That being said, it has already been announced that there will be a second book in this now series of interconnected standalone romance novels, and I want to read the second book because the second book follows the sister and there is this brother duo who they own a winery that she really enjoys, and there is this one brother who we meet in an academic affair, and he's clearly in love with Shona's sister throughout this book. So I'm going to read their book just because it was not bad, and I want to read the second book in the series. And then if there is a book that also follows Sadie's sister, I'm interested in continue reading and reading the book. But for an academic affair, I ended up giving it 3 stars. It started really well, and then it ended up being very meh and kind of disappointing. So the next book I finished reading in April was called So Cute to See You by Francesca Hornak. This is a book I never really saw anyone talking about, but it was advertised for fans of The Wedding People, which, hi, I'm a fan of The Wedding People. But basically in this book we follow this group of friends who they used to be really close friends in Oxford. They graduated in 2004 from Oxford, and they all were like from the arts people, and they were really close friends when they were in Oxford. But right after they graduated in 2004, the friendship group kind of have a falling out. They no longer really talk to each other, they're no longer close to each other. And 15 years later, they're all going to meet up again because there is this one friend from the friend group that they all still have contact with, they're all still friends with, and he's getting married. He's having a destination wedding at the south of France, and this friend group is reuniting all of them for the first time since 2004, and we are kind of figuring out what is going on with their lives, why they stopped being friends, and all the secrets that they are holding, because all these characters, they get to the wedding, they look their best, but they're all keeping a lot of secrets from each other and from everyone, even from the people that are close to them. One of them is recovering from a heartbreak from which this level of the heartbreak no one really knows about. One of them is having trouble with his partner and also with his kids. His relationship with his kids are not the way he wanted to be, and also his relationship with his partner is not great. It's kind of like they're thinking of breaking up, and he has a lot of debt. And you have another character who he became a really famous actor, but the fame also gave him a lot of anxiety, and he's dealing with depression, he's dealing with anxiety, he's dealing with substance abuse, he's dealing with alcoholism, and he's not telling anyone. And basically in this book we are figuring out what happened with this friend group and what is happening in their lives right now. And this was a really nice book to read. It was quite short, and again, it was nice to read. I liked reading it, but it is a book that definitely needs to have trigger warnings at the beginning of the book. It definitely needs trigger warnings because it talks about eating disorders, it talks about miscarriage, it talks about infertility, it talks about debt, it talks about violence, it talks about substance abuse, it talks about alcoholism, it talks about depression, it talks about anxiety. This book deals with so many heavy topics, and the way it deals with it is not necessarily heavy. Just because it's dealing with so many heavy topics, it needs to have trigger warnings. I ended up giving So Good to See You 4 stars. And now let's move on to the last and final book, the last book I finished reading in April. And honestly, I'm feeling self-conscious about this video because I feel like I'm not explaining the plot of the books that well. And this book is going to make me even more self-conscious, because I read The War Sky by Kate Canterbury. This is a very spicy romance where we follow Sebastian and Sarah. He is a trauma surgeon and she's a plastic surgeon. They both work at this hospital in Boston, and they don't really get along. And at the beginning of the book they get into this massive fight that gets the attention of the whole hospital, and they do end up doing kind of like an anger management course, conflict resolution course with HR, and it's mandatory for them to do this course together for like 2 months. And essentially he's very grumpy, Sebastian is very like grumpy, and the two are not getting along. Sebastian and Sarah are not getting along, but then they found out that basically their animosity towards each other also leads them to give each other special hugs, and they kind of enter this enemies to benefit situation, and that's basically the setup of the book. And I picked this book up because I saw a recommendation on Reddit of someone saying, if you loved Close Off, if you like Close Off by Stephanie Archer, read this book because similar vibes, are going to enjoy it. And I really liked Close Off by Stephanie Archer, so I added this book to my list of books I want to read one day in my life. And I was in a mood where I just wanted to pick like a brain off, not much, it doesn't require much thinking kind of book that you can read in one sitting. So I said, you know what, I'm going to pick The War Sky because I heard great things about it. Also, if you go on Goodreads, raving reviews about this book. And I wonder if I read the same book as these people. If you like this book, great for you, I'm happy for you. Also, please explain to me why you like this book, but also happy for you, happy that you like this book. I hated it. When you reach like the 75% mark, I was reading this book and it was kind of like a car crash that you can't stop looking at it. But then it reached 75% of the book and I was like, I maybe should see an this book because I'm really not enjoying it. But then I was like, you know what, I'm already read 75% of this book and I'm stubborn. So I'm just going to do some quick reading and finish reading this book. I really didn't like this book. Sebastian gave me incredible amounts of it because it's just so grumpy grump and serious doctor DM, and also like he tells Sarah to shut up like multiple times throughout the book. It's just so annoying and ill, and I became such a ick. The writing style wasn't my favorite. Also, like, this is the moment where I should have known 100% for sure that this book wasn't for me. This book is extremely spicy. It's very spicy. There's like 50 to 100 scenes of them giving each other the special hug. And if you like this sort of book, great for you. I'm happy for you. Not my kind of book. When there is too much spicy scene, and just for the sake of having spicy scenes in a book, it's one of my major bookish icks. And the more I read romance, the more it becomes my bookish ick. Like, if it isn't well done, I will probably not enjoy this book, and it was the case with The Worst Guy. I'm not even sure if I'm going to add the cover of this book to this section of the video. If I did, it's because turns out this book has a different cover from the one on Kindle Unlimited, because the cover from Kindle Unlimited also added to me having a massive ick throughout the book, because the cover it has a shirtless man on the cover, and another one of my bookish icks is shirtless man on the cover in a contemporary setting like Fabio. That's kind of like, ooh, it's retro. Random shirtless man in the cover of a romance book. Ew. So I'm never giving The Worst Guy 2 stars. If you like this book, I'm very happy for you. This also seems to be a very popular book, so if you read it, I'm very happy for you. Not for me, so not for me. And now I'm questioning getting more bookish recommendations from Reddit. Do you have any Reddit pages, Reddit communities that gives great book recommendations? Please let me know in the comment section. That's it for the 14 books that I finished reading between March and April. If you read any of these books, please let's talk about it. Let's chat about it on the comment section. Please let me know your thoughts. If there's any book you think I should prioritize reading this month and the coming months, please also let me know in the comment section. And yes, that's it for this video. If you keep wondering, Carol, why do you keep looking down when you are new here? If you have watched any of my previous wrap-ups, you probably already know what's going on, but you don't. I have my notebook with my notes. But yes, if you liked this video, please consider leaving a like and subscribe to the channel, and I hope to see you with a new video very, very soon. Bye! Also, this video is like, the raw footage is over 50 minutes long, so it will be interesting to edit this one.